Mike Stone and Lucy West stood in front of the old metal door that led into the mountain. Lucy held her camera tight, trying to stop her hands from shaking. She had spent months reading old news stories about people who went missing near this bunker back in the 1980s. She took pictures of old buildings for a living, but this place gave her a strange feeling in her stomach. Mike checked their backpacks one more time. He used to be in the army, and when Lucy showed him the secret papers she'd found about this place, he knew he had to help her look inside. Lucy was good with her camera, and Mike knew about military buildings. They made a good team. "You really want to do this?" Mike asked as he turned on his big flashlight. "Old bunkers like this can be really dangerous. The roof might fall in, or the air might be bad. That's why I brought all the safety stuff you told me to," Lucy said. She pulled out an old map of the bunker. "This place goes really deep underground, 10 floors down. Don't you want to find out what they were hiding down there?" They had gotten the key from Bob, an old man who used to watch over the bunker. He told them to stay away after dark, but they didn't listen. The sun was going down now, making long shadows on the ground. When Mike put the key in the door, it made a loud squeaking noise. The door opened slowly, and a weird metal-smelling air came out. They shined their lights inside and saw concrete walls with old warning signs and strange marks on them. Mike had been in many military buildings, but he'd never seen marks like these before. As soon as they walked in, Lucy's camera stopped working. The screen just showed snow, like an old TV with bad reception. Their phones didn't work either. Mike took out an old compass, but the red arrow just kept spinning around and around. "That's really weird," Mike whispered. His voice bounced off the walls. "Something strange is going on here." Before he could finish talking, they heard a sound from deep in the bunker. It was like a machine running, but also like an animal growling. Lucy grabbed Mike's arm. The sound got louder, and then suddenly stopped. "We can still leave," Mike said quietly. But Lucy was already walking toward a strange green light coming from around the corner. The light would get bright, then dim, then bright again, like it was breathing. In the green light, they could see deep scratches in the concrete walls. "Look at these marks," Lucy said, touching the scratches. Something made these from inside the bunker like it was trying to break out. They came to a place where the hallway split into 3 paths. Each path had a sign above it. One said labs, one said prison, and one said top secret. The green light was coming from the top secret path, getting brighter and darker in a steady beat. While they were trying to decide which way to go, they heard something that made their blood run cold. A child laughing. Lucy knew from her research that no kids had ever been allowed in this bunker. Mike and Lucy looked at each other. They knew they should turn around and run, but they had to find out what was hidden in the darkness below. Lucy took a deep breath and pointed her flashlight down the top secret hallway. "We should follow the green light," she whispered. "That's not normal. It has to be coming from something." Mike nodded, but his hand kept touching the gun he had brought just in case. The scratches on the walls got deeper as they walked further in. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete floor, and water dripped somewhere in the darkness. The green light led them to a large room filled with old computers and broken screens. Thick dust covered everything, but there were fresh footprints in the dust, small ones like a child's, going toward a heavy metal door at the back of the room. "Look at this," Mike said, picking up an old folder from a desk. The papers inside were about something called Project Shadow Walker. Most of the words were crossed out with black ink, but they could read a few sentences. "Test subject shows unusual abilities in containment failing. Subjects must be kept in the dark." The child's laugh came again, closer this time, and one of the old computers suddenly turned on by itself. Green words appeared on the screen. "Help us. We're still here." Lucy's hands shook as she took pictures with her backup camera. "Mike," she said quietly, "these footprints are fresh, but they only go one way. There are no prints coming back." A cold wind blew through the room, even though they were deep underground. Papers flew off the desks, and the metal door at the back of the room slowly creaked open. The green light was stronger through that door, and now they could hear what sounded like children whispering. "We should go back," Mike said, but his voice didn't sound sure. "This isn't right. None of this is right." Just then, they heard heavy footsteps coming from the hallway behind them, too heavy to be a child's. The footsteps got closer and closer. Lucy and Mike looked at each other in fear. They could either go back toward those footsteps or forward through the metal door, where the children's whispers were coming from. "Quick," Lucy said, pulling Mike toward the metal door. "We can hide in there until whatever that is goes away." They rushed through the door and closed it quietly behind them. The green light was all around them now, coming from strange tubes that lined the walls. Inside the tubes was a glowing liquid, and in the liquid they saw dark shapes moving. The heavy footsteps entered the computer room. Through the door, they heard something big moving around, knocking over chairs and tables. Whatever it was looking for them. Lucy's camera caught a glimpse of something that made her gasp. In one of the tubes, a face pressed against the glass. The face of a young boy, his eyes glowing green. Then another face appeared in another tube and another. All children, all with glowing eyes, all looking right at them. The thing in the computer room was getting closer to their door. They had to make a choice: stay with the strange children in the tubes, or try to run past whatever was coming for them. But before they could decide, all the children in the tubes smiled at once and the green liquid started to drain away. The green liquid drained faster and faster from the tubes. Mike and Lucy backed away as the glass tubes began to crack. The heavy footsteps outside stopped right in front of their door. They were trapped between two terrifying choices. "The vents," Mike whispered suddenly, pointing up at a large air duct. "We can climb through there." He quickly pushed a metal cabinet under the vent and helped Lucy climb up. Just as Mike was pulling himself up, the metal door burst open. In the green light, they saw something that didn't look human. It was tall, wearing what looked like an old military uniform, but its skin was gray and stretched too tight over its face. Its eyes were completely black. The thing sniffed the air like an animal and looked right at them. Lucy bit her lip to stop from screaming. The children in the tubes were almost free now, the glass breaking piece by piece. The creature took a step toward them, but then all the tubes shattered at once. Green liquid flooded the floor. The children stepped out of the broken tubes. There were 7 of them, boys and girls, all wearing old hospital gowns. Their skin glowed faintly green, and their eyes shone like lights. The creature turned toward them and made a horrible growling sound. "Go," one of the children said to Mike and Lucy. "We'll stop it. It's been keeping us here for too long." The children joined hands, forming a circle around the creature. A bright green light filled the room. Mike and Lucy crawled through the vent as fast as they could. Behind them, they heard the creature screaming and the children chanting words in a language they didn't understand. The whole bunker started to shake. They followed the vent until they found another opening. Mike kicked it open, and they dropped down into a new room. This one looked like a doctor's office, with old beds and medical equipment. On the walls were pictures of the children, before whatever had been done to them. "Look at these dates," Lucy said, pointing to the pictures. "These kids went missing 40 years ago. The newspaper stories I read, these are the same children." They heard more screaming from the room they'd left, both from the creature and the children. The bunker shook harder, and pieces of ceiling started falling down. "We need to help them," Lucy said, but Mike grabbed her arm. "Wait," he said, picking up an old notebook from a desk. "We need to understand what happened here first." He opened the notebook and started reading out loud. "Day 45 of Project Shadow Walker. The children are responding well to the treatment. Their powers are growing stronger. But there's a problem. Something else is coming through when they use their abilities. Something dark. We can't control it anymore." The lights in the room flickered, and they heard something new. Footsteps coming from every direction. Lots of them. And they weren't the children's footsteps. Whatever else the scientists had brought through was coming for them. Mike shined his flashlight down both ends of the hallway. Dark shapes moved in the shadows, getting closer and closer. "Run or hide?" he asked Lucy quickly. They had seconds to decide. "Hide," Lucy whispered, pulling Mike behind a large metal cabinet. Just in time, dark shapes moved into the room, dragging their feet as they walked. In the dim light, Lucy and Mike could see they were wearing old lab coats, but their faces were hidden in shadow. Mike held his breath as one of the shapes passed close to their hiding spot. Through a crack, they could see its face, or where a face should have been. It was like looking at a blank piece of skin stretched over a skull. The notebook Mike was holding suddenly felt very hot. He opened it again, and words started appearing on the blank pages by themselves. "They came through the gaps we made. Every time we tested the children's powers, they pulled through more of them. The shadow people. They're still hungry after 40 years. A child's voice rang through the bunker. Run! We can't hold it back anymore. The whole building shook harder, and green light flashed through the cracks in the walls. This way, Mike whispered, pointing to a door marked Emergency Stairs. They waited until the shadow people moved away, then ran for the door. Behind them, they heard the creature from before roaring in pain. The stairs went down instead of up. We need to go up to get out, Lucy said, but Mike shook his head. Look at this sign, he said, pointing his flashlight at the wall. Level 7, Project Control Room. That's where we'll find answers. They ran down the stairs as the bunker continued to shake. The steps were slippery with wet green slime that glowed in the dark. On each floor, they could hear more shadow people searching for them. Finally, they reached Level 7. The control room was huge, filled with old computers and strange machines. On the main screen, which was somehow still working, there was a message blinking in green letters. Warning, containment breach in progress, Shadow Walker subjects. Active, dark matter infection spreading. Lucy found an old videotape marked Project Shadow Walker, Final Warning. She put it in a player that still had power. A scared-looking scientist appeared on the screen. If you're watching this, get out now, the scientist said. We thought we could give the children special powers, but we didn't know the price. Every time they used their abilities, they opened doors to somewhere else. The shadow people came through first, then the Guardian. The scientist looked over his shoulder in fear. The creature in the military uniform. That was our commander. He changed, started serving them, keeping the children here, feeding. The video cut off as the building shook harder than ever. Parts of the ceiling crashed down around them. Through the security cameras, they could see the shadow people coming down the stairs after them. But on another camera, they saw something else. The 7 children, their bodies glowing bright green, floating down a different hallway. They were headed somewhere with purpose. Look, Lucy pointed at a map on the wall. There's a way out through the old tunnel system, but, she paused, looking at the camera showing the children. We can't just leave them here. Mike checked his gun and looked at Lucy. Those kids have been trapped here for 40 years, but if we help them, we might get trapped too, or worse. He saw more shadow people coming down another hallway. We have about 10 seconds to decide. We have to help them, Lucy said, grabbing Mike's arm. They helped us escape that creature. We can't leave them here. They checked the map again and saw that all paths led to something marked the core, a big round room at the very bottom of the bunker. The children on the security camera were heading there too. Mike and Lucy ran down a narrow hallway, following the green glow on the walls. The shadow people were getting closer. They could hear their dry, scraping footsteps echo through the bunker. The creature in the military uniform was somewhere too, roaring in anger. Turned a corner and almost ran into one of the children, a small girl with glowing green eyes. You came to help, she said, smiling. I'm Sarah. I was the first one they tested on. She pointed down a dark hallway. The others are opening the core. It's the only way to send the shadows back. Back where? Mike asked, but deep down he already knew the answer. To the dark place, Sarah said. Where they came from. Where they took our real bodies 40 years ago. She looked down at her glowing hands. These aren't our real bodies anymore. We're just memories, ghosts. But we're strong enough now to end this. Suddenly, the creature in the military uniform crashed through the wall behind them. But now they could see it better. Parts of its skin were missing, showing a dark, empty space underneath, like a hole in the world. Run! Sarah shouted. A blast of green energy shot from her hands, pushing the creature back. Get to the core. The others need help. Lucy and Mike ran, following Sarah's directions. They could hear her fighting the creature behind them. The shadows on the walls moved and stretched, trying to grab them as they ran past. They burst into the core room. It was a huge round space with a deep pit in the middle, glowing with swirling green and black energy. The other 6 children stood around it, holding hands. Their eyes were closed and they were speaking strange words. They're trying to open it wider, a voice said. They turned to see an old man standing in the corner. He looked solid, not like a ghost. I'm Dr. Wilson. I've been hiding down here since it all went wrong, trying to fix my mistakes. What happened here? Lucy asked, taking pictures of everything. What did you do to these kids? We thought we could give them powers, make them special, help them see other worlds, Dr. Wilson said sadly. But we didn't understand. The shadows noticed them looking, started looking back, started coming through. He pointed at the pit. This is a door between worlds. We have to close it forever. The children's chanting got louder. The shadow people were flooding into the room now, but they couldn't get past the circle of children. The creature in the military uniform appeared in another doorway, dragging Sarah. But she was still glowing, still fighting. The only way to close it is to push everything back through, Dr. Wilson said. But someone has to go with them, to make sure they don't come back. He looked at Mike and Lucy with tired eyes. Will you help us finish this? Before they could answer, Sarah broke free from the creature and floated to join the other children. The pit of energy grew larger, pulling at everything in the room like a giant vacuum. Mike and Lucy had to hold onto metal pipes to keep from being pulled in. They had to make a choice, but what they decided would change everything. We'll help, Lucy shouted over the roaring wind from the pit. What do we need to do? Dr. Wilson pulled a metal box from under his coat. These crystals, he said, opening it to show 7 glowing green stones. They powered the original experiments. Each child needs one to channel their full power. But someone has to bring them into the circle. Mike grabbed the box. The shadows can't cross the children's circle. I'll go. But as Mike stepped forward, the creature in the military uniform charged at them. Dr. Wilson pushed Mike and Lucy aside just in time, but the creature caught him instead. In the struggle, the box of crystals flew from Mike's hands, scattering the crystals across the floor. Get the crystals to the children! Dr. Wilson yelled as the creature dragged him toward the shadows. Don't worry about me. I deserve this. This was all my fault. Lucy and Mike split up, sliding across the floor to grab the crystals. The shadow people reached for them with their dark hands, but couldn't cross the invisible line made by the children's power. Sarah's voice rang out. Hurry! We can't hold the circle much longer. Mike grabbed 3 crystals and Lucy got 4. They ran around the edge of the room, tossing the crystals one by one to each child. As each crystal reached a child's hands, their green glow grew stronger. The creature threw Dr. Wilson into a group of shadow people and charged at Mike. Lucy screamed a warning, but she was too far away to help. Just as the creature was about to grab Mike, Sarah broke the circle again and shot a beam of green light at it. The circle! The other children cried. Without Sarah, their power weakened. Shadow people started pushing through the gap. Sarah, catch! Lucy threw the last crystal to Sarah. The girl caught it in mid-air, and her whole body lit up like a green sun. She flew back to her place, completing the circle again. Now all 7 children were glowing brilliant green. The shadow creatures were pushed back. Even the creature in the uniform stumbled away from the light. The pit of swirling energy grew larger, and the pull got stronger. It's working! Dr. Wilson shouted from where he lay hurt on the floor. But someone still needs to make sure the door closes from the other side. The children's voices joined together. We'll do it. We've been here too long anyway. Our real bodies are already over there. But the creature in the uniform wasn't done. It made a horrible laughing sound and started growing bigger, darker, its uniform ripping apart. The shadow people swirled around it like smoke, making it stronger. No! Sarah cried. It's absorbing them. If it gets any stronger, we won't be able to push it back. Mike raised his gun, but the bullets passed right through the growing shadow monster. Lucy's camera flashed, and for a second the creature seemed to shrink away from the bright light. The light, Lucy said. It doesn't like light. She reached for her backup flash units, but she knew simple camera flashes wouldn't be enough to stop what the creature was becoming. Lucy had an idea. Mike, help me grab all the emergency lights from the walls. She pointed to the large battery-powered lights mounted around the core room. The creature was still growing, now almost touching the high ceiling, its body a swirling mass of shadows. They ran around the room, ripping down lights while dodging the creature's huge dark arms. The children's circle kept the shadow people back, but their green glow was starting to flicker like dying light bulbs. We're getting tired, Sarah called out. We can't hold it much longer. Dr. Wilson pulled himself up against a wall. The control panel, he shouted, pointing to a metal box near the door. It controls all the bunker's backup lights. But it needs a code. Mike ran to the panel while Lucy gathered the emergency lights they'd collected. The creature swung one of its massive arms at her, but she rolled under it, clutching the lights to her chest. "What's the code?" Mike yelled to Dr. Wilson. I can't remember." Dr. Wilson held his head. "It was so long ago." Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "Your daughter's birthday. You used to talk about her all the time during the tests. July 15th. Mike punched in 071 The panel beeped and opened. "Lucy, now!" Mike shouted. Lucy turned on all the emergency lights at once and slid them across the floor into the children's circle. The green crystals the children held seemed to absorb the light, glowing brighter than ever. The creature shrieked as the combined lights hit it. Its huge body started to break apart, shadow people falling away from it. The pull from the pit grew stronger, and the loose shadows were sucked toward it. "It's working!" Lucy yelled. But then she saw Mike wasn't beside her anymore. The pull of the pit had caught him, and he was sliding toward the edge. Lucy grabbed a metal pipe sticking out of the wall and reached for Mike's hand. Their fingers just barely touched. Behind Mike, the creature was shrinking, roaring in anger as more shadows were pulled away from it. "Hold on!" Lucy screamed, stretching as far as she could. The children's circle was breaking up. They were floating now, moving toward the pit willingly. "It's time," Sarah said, her voice somehow calm in all the chaos. "We can go home now, but you need to close the door behind us." Dr. Wilson stumbled to the control panel. "There's one more switch," he said. "It'll overload the power, seal the pit forever, but—" He looked at the children with tears in his eyes. "But you'll be trapped on the other side." "We're already trapped," Sarah smiled sadly. "Have been for 40 years. At least this way, we'll be free." The creature made one last effort, reaching for Mike with what was left of its shadowy arms. Lucy finally caught Mike's hand and pulled with all her strength. They fell backward just as Sarah and the other children joined hands in a circle one last time. The children's green glow became blinding. They started spinning around the pit, faster and faster, turning into a ring of light. The creature and all the shadow people were pulled in, screaming as they disappeared into the darkness. Then the children, too, began to fade. "Thank you." Sarah's voice echoed in Lucy and Mike's heads. "Now push the button, end it, and tell our families what happened to us." Lucy and Mike ran to the control panel where Dr. Wilson stood with his hand over the final switch. His fingers were shaking. "I can't do it," he whispered. "They're just children. They stopped being children 40 years ago." Mike said gently, putting his hand on the switch too. "You have to let them go." The pit was growing bigger, its edges starting to crack the concrete floor. The children were almost completely see-through now, their green light getting dimmer. The creature made one last try to reform itself, but the pull of the pit kept tearing it apart. Lucy took out her camera and pointed it at the children. Through the lens, she could see their real faces for a moment. Not the glowing ghost children, but 7 scared kids in old hospital gowns, finally finding peace. She took the picture. "Do it now!" Sarah's voice echoed through the room. "The door won't stay open much longer." Dr. Wilson closed his eyes. Lucy put her hand on top of his, and Mike put his hand on top of hers. Together, they pushed the switch down. A loud alarm started ringing. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. The computer screens around them showed the same message. "Core, overload initiated. Facility will seal in 60 seconds. The green ring of children spun faster and faster around the pit. Their voices joined together in a song that sounded both happy and sad. The creature made one final scream as the children's power pulled it into the darkness. Then the children themselves started falling into the pit, one by one, still holding hands. Sarah was the last to go. Just before she disappeared, she turned to look at them. She seemed more solid for a moment, more real. "Find our families," she said again. "Tell them we were brave. Tell them we saved everyone." Then she let go, falling into the pit with a peaceful smile. "We have to get out," Mike shouted over the alarm. "This whole place is going to cave in." They helped Dr. Wilson up and ran for the emergency exit. Behind them, the pit started to close, green light shooting up from it like a giant spotlight. The walls were shaking harder than ever, and chunks of ceiling were falling everywhere. They ran up the emergency stairs as fast as they could. Lucy counted the levels as they passed. Level 6, Level 5, Level 4. The whole bunker was falling apart around them. "Lucy, your camera!" Dr. Wilson called out as they ran. "The proof! We need the proof!" Lucy checked her camera screen. The last picture was still there, the children's real faces, caught in that one moment of truth. And all her other pictures were there too. The warning signs, the tubes, the strange marks on the walls. Everything they needed to tell the real story. They were almost at the top when they heard it. One last child's laugh echoing through the bunker. But this time it didn't sound scary. It sounded like freedom. They reached level 2 when Dr. Wilson stumbled and fell. "Leave me," he shouted. "I deserve to stay here with my mistakes. No more people are dying in this bunker," Mike said firmly, pulling the old scientist up. Lucy helped from the other side, and they kept climbing as the stairs crumbled behind them. The ground floor was barely recognizable now. The halls were filled with fallen concrete and broken pipes shooting steam. The green light from below was getting brighter, chasing them up through the cracks in the floor. "The door!" Lucy pointed ahead. The heavy metal entrance door was starting to close by itself, the bunker's final lockdown. They had seconds to get out. They ran faster, half carrying Dr. Wilson. The door was halfway closed when they reached it. Mike rolled under first, then helped pull Dr. Wilson through. Lucy dove under last, her camera held tight against her chest. The door slammed shut behind them with a loud bang. They ran up the hill away from the entrance, falling onto the grass as the ground shook. In the early morning light, they watched as the hillside seemed to sink. The bunker was collapsing in on itself, falling into the pit far below. A bright green light shot up from the ground one last time, lighting up the sky like a giant spotlight. For just a moment, they saw 7 small shapes in the light, holding hands in a circle, dancing as they faded away. Then the light disappeared and the hillside became still and quiet. Lucy checked her camera with shaking hands. The pictures were all there, the proof they needed. Dr. Wilson sat in the grass, tears running down his face as he looked at the screen. "I know where they're buried," he said quietly. "The original bodies, I mean. We told their families they ran away, but..." He wiped his eyes. "I'll show you. They deserve proper graves. Real funerals. Their families deserve the truth." Mike helped him stand up. "We'll need to be careful how we tell this story," he said. "Most people won't believe it." Lucy looked at her camera again, at the last picture of the children's real faces. "They don't have to believe in ghosts or shadows," she said. "They just need to know that 7 brave kids sacrificed everything to save others. That's the real story." They heard police sirens in the distance. Someone must have seen the green light in the sky. Dr. Wilson straightened his back, ready to face what was coming. "Sarah wanted us to tell their families that they were brave," Lucy said, putting her hand on Dr. Wilson's shoulder. "And we will. But first I want to know everything about them. Their favorite games, their favorite foods, what made them laugh. They deserve to be remembered as more than just test subjects." Dr. Wilson nodded slowly. "I remember everything," he said. "I've lived with their memories every day for 40 years. And now," he looked at the sunken hillside, "now it's time to set them free, by telling their whole story." The sound of sirens got closer. Soon they would have to explain what happened here. But as the sun rose higher, Lucy saw something that made her smile. 7 butterflies with slightly glowing green wings flying up into the morning sky. 1 year later, Lucy stood in front of a small crowd in the town's memorial park. Behind her was a new monument, 7 stone angels in a circle, their hands joined together. At the base of each angel was a name, a photo, and a story. "Today we remember Tommy Anderson, Sarah Mitchell, Jenny Chen, Michael Roberts, David Wilson, Rachel Green, and Amy Parker," Lucy said into the microphone. "They weren't just names in old missing person files. They were children who loved ice cream and playground games, children who had favorite toys and birthday wishes, children who were brave beyond imagination." In the crowd, 7 families sat together, holding hands and wiping tears. After 40 years of wondering what had happened to their children, they finally knew the truth, or at least the version of truth they could understand. Mike stood at the back of the crowd in his police uniform. He had helped Lucy and Dr. Wilson talk to the authorities. They told a careful version of the story, about illegal experiments, about children who sacrificed themselves to stop something terrible. They left out the shadows and the creatures. Some truths were better left in the sealed bunker. Dr. Wilson sat with the families. He had turned himself in after that night, confessing to his part in the original experiments. But when the families heard how he had helped end it, how he had kept the children's memories alive for 40 years, they asked the judge for mercy. Now he spent his days helping Lucy document everything about the 7 children. Lucy clicked to the next slide in her presentation. The crowd gasped. It was the last photo she had taken in the bunker, showing the children's real faces, young and innocent and brave. This memorial park stands on the hill where the bunker once was, Lucy continued. The ground here is peaceful now, and sometimes, if you come early in the morning, you might see 7 green butterflies dancing in a circle above the angels. After the ceremony, Lucy walked through the small museum they had made. Glass cases held the children's recovered belongings: Sarah's favorite teddy bear, Tommy's baseball cards, Jenny's ballet shoes. Each item told part of their story. The last case held Lucy's camera and a copy of her book, The 7 Lights, The True Story of the Missing Children. The book had made people cry, made them angry about the secret experiments, and most importantly, made them remember 7 special kids who had saved more lives than anyone would ever know. As the sun set, Lucy, Mike, and Dr. Wilson walked to the memorial together. They did this every week. Dr. Wilson placed fresh flowers at each angel statue, while Lucy changed the photos in the frames, showing different happy moments from the children's lives. "Look," Mike said softly, pointing up. 7 green butterflies were circling the top of the monument, their wings glowing softly in the twilight. As Lucy watched, she heard a faint sound on the evening breeze. Children laughing, playing, finally at peace. Dr. Wilson smiled through his tears. "They're still here," he said. "Not trapped anymore, not scared, just watching over us." Lucy took one last picture of the butterflies dancing above the angels. In the photo, if you looked very carefully, you could almost see 7 children holding hands, smiling down at the world they had saved. "Sweet dreams," Lucy whispered as the butterflies flew up into the darkening sky. "You can rest now. Your story will live forever."